two now former Iowa receivers have found new homes via the NCAA's transfer portal. More on that in a second. But first, a reminder, if you haven't already done so, to hit the like button and please hit the subscribe button. Help us grow this channel as we are consistently producing Iowa football content throughout the week, even during the offseason, and Iowa basketball content. Iowa basketball post-game shows after every game, live shows with Coach Gary Close right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube. Follow us also Twitter, Facebook for the best content in the area. All right, the big news over the weekend, Tyrone Tracy finds a home, Desmond Hutson finds a home. Now, I know we're talking about two different levels of receivers as far as production at Iowa, but two familiar foes as far as who these two individuals decided on. So, first of all, let's talk about Desmond Hudson, the 6'3", 6'4" wide receiver, originally from the Kansas City area, finds a new home in the state of Iowa at UNI, FCS. I wouldn't say FCS power, but certainly a perennial FCS contender in the UNI Panthers, and sort of an interesting storyline because, again, Desmond Hudson, not an in-state kid. He was not a real highly recruited kid either. Again, the size, I think, intrigued Iowa. He was a physical kid, class of 2019. But as far as offers, if you're looking at 247 Sports and Rivals, I didn't see any other offers in doing this little digging that I did before this video other than South Dakota State and Iowa. So, again, some FCS attention, and the Hawkeyes, it just didn't work out here. He was already behind the 8 ball heading into this season, behind the likes of Charlie Jones, Nico Reganey, Tyrone Tracy, and perhaps, even Jackson Ritter, who was a walk-on. And then again, was he ahead of Max Cooper? I think that was even in question. And then I think this year when Arlen Bruce and Keegan Johnson come in and they start gaining playing time, and rightfully so, those two kids have been tremendous as freshmen. Desmond Hudson, you got to do what's best for you. I don't think anybody can blame a kid like Desmond for looking for greener pastures and an opportunity to prove himself. And certainly UNI is an excellent opportunity. It's a choice that, again, he's a Midwest kid, but he's not an in-state kid. I commend him for making that choice, although it would have been his choice wherever he went. But you can't blame him for wanting to go up and play with Mike Farley and just a tremendous program up in Cedar Falls. Wish Desmond Hudson all the best. Iowa does not play UNI next year, and of course the FCS schedule has been sort of back and forth with the Big Ten and their standards over recent years, but Iowa does not play them next year or the year beyond, so no apparent meeting, I guess I should say, in the near future. Not the case, though, with Iowa's other wide receiver that found a new home in recent days, and that is Iowa wide receiver Tyrone Tracy Jr. Of course, we knew he had entered the portal, a couple of weeks ago, which was not a surprise to any of us. We know the storylines. He was hyped up as potentially one of the biggest underrated or even dark horse candidates for Big Ten Receiver of the Year heading into the season. Now, that you may laugh at that and scoff at that, but Tyrone at least talked about that heading into the season, that he wanted to be the best receiver in the Big Ten. And again, sort of a crazy idea now when you look at the receivers across this conference, whether it be Ty Freifogel, David Bell, Jahan Dotson. It's a loaded group, and of course everybody at Ohio State. But Tyrone had a down year. Iowa tried to get him involved early. There were some games in the non-conference where Iowa made a concerted effort to get him the ball, and to be frank, Tyrone didn't always make the best of it. He suffered from some drops. Lost his footing at times. Just was you felt like he was maybe pressing a bit. And maybe that's because of the competition that was coming up behind him. Again, we talked about Bruce and Keegan Johnson. So, we know his brother made some I shouldn't say news, but social media news at least, by complaining about how Iowa was using Tyrone. And then, of course, Tyrone later in the season tweets out something about a Swiss Army knife and how, why wouldn't you use a Swiss Army knife that you have in your roster? You just felt like at some point he was going to make that decision. Now, the great news for Tyrone, and I know this is going to sound like I'm placating Tyrone Tracy, and I'm not trying to do that, but he's an Indianapolis guy, and although he didn't have the year he wanted, they did win the Big Ten West. They did play in the Big Ten championship game, which was in his hometown. So I would hope that I hope he takes, even though this was a tough year, last year was a tough year for Tyrone, you hope that he can look back and have some fond memories. As far as I am concerned, and as from what I know, and again, that's limited, I think he has a good relationship with the Iowa coaching staff. I think Kirk Ferentz, I'll give Kirk credit in this regard. It seems like Kirk has done a good job since last summer, and I'm not talking about this, I'm talking about 2020 and some of the offseason issues that this program had. I think Kirk Ferentz has done a nice job responding to frustrations from players on his team. Again, the Tyrone Tracy tweet could have easily been a situation where he submits himself into the portal midseason, and that didn't happen. He stuck it out and even got some playing time in the Big Ten championship game, and just seemed to stay locked in, despite the fact that he wasn't playing well or getting targeted as much. Tyrone Tracy was always there. You saw him celebrating with his teammates, so that's a positive. And again, I give Kirk Ferentz credit for handling that in a way that would benefit the relationship between both parties. And now Tyrone moves on to Purdue, and it's interesting. According to Tyrone Tracy's Twitter handle, earlier in the recruiting period, again, he's only been in the portal for a couple of weeks, you kind of see a theme with some of the teams that were offering Tyrone Tracy, and that's not to downplay the player that I think Tyrone has the ability to be, because again, 2 years ago he was tremendous in a Hawkeye uniform. But listen to some of these offers that Tyrone Tracy reported early on in the process, again, just a couple of weeks ago. Hawaii offered Tyrone Tracy. Miami, Ohio, of course, his brother just committed and signed with Miami. His brother is a wide receiver, so we thought perhaps he ends up with his brother. That does not happen. Eastern Illinois offered Tyrone Tracy. So you see, you've got a MAC school in there. You've got another group of 5 school in Hawaii. And then, of course, you have Eastern Illinois. So, not a lot of high major offers. And then he reports this offer from Purdue. And, of course, the one school I didn't mention in there was Houston. They did offer as well. And they're on their way to the Big 12 Conference. But the point is, Purdue really was the only current high major offer that he received, or at least that he reported on social media, which was interesting because it's ironic on a couple of fronts. Obviously, Iowa, for one, you could call Iowa-Purdue a rivalry, even though it's not technically a trophy game. It is a West game that has been very important for Iowa in recent years, ever since Jeff Brom has been there. It's been a very important game for the Hawkeyes, and a game where Iowa has struggled against wide receivers. And of course, we know the names: Anthony Mahungu, David Bell. Of course, Rondale Moore was tremendous. Ended up having a ton of great performances against Iowa because he was hurt a lot against Iowa. But they've just had guys that have caused Iowa issues. So it's ironic on that front. Then, of course, you could call it ironic, too, that he's going back to play about an hour from his hometown of Indianapolis. But it's got to be a dream come true for Tyrone. Happy for the kid. Again, what better place to go than back to basically your hometown and being able to play for Jeff Brom, who, like it if you're a Hawkeye fan, is one of the most innovative minds, offensive minds in the entire country. Not just this division or conference, the entire country. And talk about a guy who knows how to make his wide receivers better and to use them effectively and to take advantage of weaknesses on defense and to find those weaknesses and exploit them. David Bell, number 3, leaves Purdue. He's going to the NFL draft, much to the happiness for Iowa fans. And again, that's understandable. David Bell has been absolutely spectacular against the Hawkeyes, but now another number 3 slides into his place. I'm not trying to make a direct comparison between Bell and Tracy. I think that's not fair to David Bell. But again, if anybody's going to revitalize and regenerate what was once a promising career for Tyrone Tracy, perhaps it is Jeff Brom. And here's a side note: Iowa plays at Purdue early next Big Ten season. So what a fascinating storyline. And by the way, I know we always talk about how much Iowa struggles against Purdue wide receivers. I did a little research here before this video just to sort of demonstrate the struggles that Iowa has had. And I'm going all the way back to actually prior to Jeff Brom's arrival in West Lafayette. This is actually under Darrell Hazel, the previous head coach at Purdue. This is back in 2015. course, this was a game Iowa clinched the West. Remember, that was the magical year where they go 12-0. It was a snowy day before that late November game, and Iowa wins that game. But Iowa has given up over 100 yards to a Purdue wide receiver every year since 15. That is astounding. I would guarantee you they have not done that to any other team. Now, again, I have not fleshed out all the data on this, but I can tell you the individuals. So 15, Iowa wins, but gives up 117 yards on 9 catches to a guy named Yancey for Purdue. Again, I was at that game, don't really remember a spectacular performance, but again, Iowa did win. 2016 Iowa wins in a high-scoring affair as well, but again, they give up over 100 yards, this time to Cole Herdman, 7 catches for $104. That's 2016. Let's move to 2017, and believe me, folks, it only gets worse because now Jeff Brom enters the picture, who's an even better offensive mind than Darrell Hazel. And in 2017, Purdue wins. That was a disappointing result for the Hawkeyes. Sindelar throws for 229 yards, 3 picks, no touchdown, or excuse me, three touchdowns, no picks. And Anthony Mahungu burns Iowa 7 catches for $135 and 2 touchdowns. All right, and I said it only gets worse. That's absolutely the case. Let's move to 18. Mentioned Mahungu in 17. Not necessarily a household name, but he was certainly that against Iowa. 18. Terry Wright goes off. 6 catches, $146. 3 touchdowns and a long of 82 yards. All right, let's move to 19. I think you see the pattern here, folks. Move to 19. Iowa wins that game in a tight one. That was another game I was at. David Bell, 13 catches, 197 and a touchdown. In a losing effort, but 197 yards on 13 catches for David Bell. 2020, Iowa, of course, at Purdue was the opener last year. COVID-shortened season and the delayed season. And, of course, David Bell, 13 catches, 121 yards, and 3 touchdowns. All right? And, of course, we all know what happened this year. 2021, Iowa plays at home as the number 2 team in the country, gets blown out 24-7, and David Bell goes off 11 catches, 240 yards, and a touchdown, and a long of just 60, which just proves that he was just busting out plays left and right. So, I am by no means implying that Tyrone Tracy is the next 100-yard gainer against the Hawkeyes, but my point is, not only does Jeff Brom know how to effectively use wide receivers and get the most out of his wide receivers, he knows how to do it against Iowa. So that matchup next year is going to be fascinating. I wish Tyrone Tracy all the best, not against Iowa, but I wish him all the best moving forward. I surely hope that he can regenerate his season. And again, we knew this was coming. He was in the portal. And again, yes, you can come back. Technically, you can come back if you enter the portal, but it rarely happens. I don't think it's ever happened at Iowa, with the exception being Davion Nixon. If I'm wrong, leave a comment below. But I'm pretty certain that Nixon's the only example of that. And again, that is typically the exception. Once a kid enters the portal, he's likely gone, almost certainly gone. So again, Desmond Hutson, wish him the best at UNI. Iowa won't play them anytime soon, but Iowa will play Purdue next year in West Lafayette. The Battle of the Hawkeyes versus Tyrone Tracy, Jeff Brom, Aiden O'Connell, and that entire Boilermakers squad. No real rumblings from Iowa in the transfer portal. It's been slow. It's been methodical. We talked about quarterbacks last week over at the Iowa at the Voice of College Football channel with Mark Rogers. More quarterbacks off the board. Bo Nix is off the board. He heads to Oregon. It sounds like Zach Calzada is headed to Pitt, although there's nothing official. Jack Plummer, Purdue quarterback transfer, sounds like he's headed to Cal. Adrian Martinez is headed to Kansas State. Players are very quickly getting taken off the board, and if Iowa doesn't act soon, it will miss out. You can't wait till after the bowl game, folks. The portal is moving now, and it's moving fast. We'll, of course, be live over at Iowa at the Voice of College Football on Tuesday, talking more football with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. And we look forward to talking, hopefully, about maybe some rumblings that come up in the next 48 hours. But I won't hold my breath, and I don't think you should either. Thank you for joining us this evening. Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm. Stay tuned. More content on the way.